My name is Claire Brooks. My husband had been gone for just 12 days when my mother-in-law looked me straight in the eyes and smiled. You own nothing, she said softly. After today, you'll finally understand that you were never really part of this family. She wasn't whispering because she was afraid someone would hear her. She whispered because she wanted me to hear every single word. We were standing outside the Fairfax County Courthouse, waiting for my husband's probate hearing to begin. Lawyers hurried through the revolving doors, while families sat quietly on stone benches, each carrying their own private heartbreak. Mine had started with a phone call just before sunrise. Daniel Brooks, my husband of 19 years, had suffered a massive heart attack during a charity fishing trip with two retired firefighters. By the time help arrived, there was nothing anyone could do. One ordinary Tuesday, I was making coffee for the two of us. By noon, I was choosing the suit he would be buried in. The days after his funeral passed in a blur of casseroles, sympathy cards, and sleepless nights. Every room in our house reminded me of him. His reading glasses still rested on the kitchen counter. His favorite coffee mug sat beside the sink exactly where he'd left it. Sometimes I caught myself listening for his truck pulling into the driveway before reality hit me all over again. Daniel wasn't just my husband. He'd been my best friend, my business partner, and the calmest man I'd ever known. Together, we had spent almost 2 decades building Brooks Industrial Solutions, a company that repaired emergency power systems for hospitals, fire departments, and nursing homes across Virginia. It hadn't been handed to us. We built it from an old rented warehouse with 1 truck, 2 toolboxes, and more determination than money. I handled the finances. Daniel handled the operations. Every success belonged to both of us. At least, that's what I believed. Apparently, Margaret Brooks believed something very different. She adjusted the diamond brooch on her expensive navy blazer before looking at me with the same cold smile she'd worn since the funeral. My son built that company, she said. Not you? I didn't answer. There was no point. For 19 years, nothing I did had ever been enough for Margaret. Not the wedding she called too small. Not the home Daniel and I renovated together. Not the birthdays, holidays, or family dinners where she reminded everyone that I came from ordinary people. She had tolerated me because Daniel loved me. Now Daniel was gone, and she clearly believed I was the last obstacle standing between her and everything he had left behind. Then the courthouse doors opened. Her attorney stepped inside with complete confidence. Mine quietly handed me a thick folder and said something that made my heart stop. I looked down at the folder in Grant's hands, expecting another stack of legal forms. Instead, he quietly said, "Claire, there's something you need to know before we walk into that courtroom." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" He glanced toward Margaret, who was laughing with her attorney near the courthouse entrance. "She isn't just contesting Daniel's estate. She's filed a petition, claiming you were never an equal owner of Brooks Industrial Solutions." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "That's impossible," I whispered. "I helped build that company." "I know," Grant replied, "and we're going to prove it." "But she's telling the court Daniel started the business with family, money, and that you were nothing more than an employee." I almost laughed at how absurd it sounded. Family money? When Daniel and I rented our first warehouse, we'd barely had enough cash to keep the lights on. I worked mornings as an accountant and spent my evenings doing payroll, answering customer calls, and cleaning the office before driving home after midnight. Daniel repaired generators with his own hands while I balanced invoices at our tiny kitchen table. There were weeks when we split one fast food meal because every extra dollar went back into the business. Margaret had never invested a single cent. She rarely even visited, but now she wanted the court to believe the company existed because of her family's generosity. Grant opened the folder and showed me copies of Margaret's filing. Every page painted the same picture. Daniel, the brilliant businessman. Margaret, the devoted mother who supported him. Me, almost invisible. By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking. Not because I feared losing the money, because 19 years of sacrifice had been erased with the stroke of a pen. Just then, the courtroom doors opened. The clerk called our case. Margaret walked past me wearing a confident smile. As she reached the doorway, she paused long enough to whisper, "When this is over, you'll be packing your clothes into boxes." Then she disappeared inside. Grant placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Remember what we talked about," he said. I nodded, though my heart was pounding. Daniel had always told me that impatient people rated their plans too early. Margaret believed today would be the day she took everything. She had no idea that before leaving home that morning, I had found something hidden inside. Daniel's old workshop, an envelope with my name written across the front in his unmistakable handwriting. And I still hadn't opened it. My hands trembled as I stared at Daniel's handwriting. For nearly 20 years, I'd seen those neat block letters on birthday cards, grocery lists, and little notes he tucked into my lunchbox whenever he knew I had a difficult day ahead. Now they were written on a plain white envelope. For Claire. Open only if I'm no longer here. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath before breaking the seal. Inside was a single handwritten letter and a small brass key taped to the corner. Claire, if you're reading this, then life didn't give us the retirement we planned. Don't waste your energy wondering if you could have saved me. You couldn't. I know my mother. I love her because she's my mother. But I've never trusted her with the future we built together. If she's fighting you, it means she's exactly where I expected her to be. Don't panic. Everything you need is already protected. A tear rolled onto the page. Daniel had always prepared for the worst. It was one of the reasons firefighters, police departments, and hospitals trusted him with their emergency systems. He believed every problem should have a backup plan. I kept reading. The brass key opens the bottom drawer of my workbench. Inside, you'll find a blue metal lockbox. Take it directly to Grant. Don't tell anyone, not even if they promise to help. Let the documents speak for themselves. I drove to the workshop before sunrise the next morning. The building was silent except for the hum of the security lights. Using the small key, I unlocked the bottom drawer exactly as Daniel had described. Hidden behind old tool manuals was a blue metal lockbox. My pulse raced as I carried it to the truck. Less than an hour later, Grant unlocked it in his office. Inside were original trust documents, ownership agreements, board resolutions, and a sealed envelope addressed to the presiding probate judge. Grant carefully read every page. Then he looked up at me with a smile I hadn't seen since Daniel's funeral. "Claire," he said quietly, "this changes everything." "What do you mean?" Daniel didn't leave the future of this company to chance. He slid one document across the desk. It showed that 5 years earlier, Daniel had transferred Brooks Industrial Solutions into an irrevocable family trust. I was listed as the majority trustee. Margaret wasn't listed anywhere. Grant leaned back in his chair. "She thinks today's hearing is about dividing an estate." He gently placed the sealed envelope back into the lockbox. "But when the judge opens this, she's going to discover there was never an estate for her to claim. In the first place, the courtroom fell silent as the bailiff called our case for the final time. Margaret Brooks rose with absolute confidence, smoothing the sleeves of her designer jacket before taking her seat beside her attorney. She didn't look at me once. She didn't have to. The smug smile on her face said she already believed the outcome belonged to her. Her attorney stood first. "For 19 years, he began, my client's son built Brooks Industrial Solutions into a respected company. As his only surviving parent, Mrs. Brooks has a rightful interest in preserving her son's legacy." He spoke for nearly 20 minutes, describing Daniel's achievements while barely mentioning me. When he finished, Margaret smiled. Then Grant stood. "Your Honor," he said calmly. "Before discussing inheritance, I asked the court to examine several documents recently recovered from Mr. Brooks, private records." He handed the blue lockbox to the bailiff. The judge unlocked it carefully. One by one, he reviewed the trust agreement, the corporate records, and the signed ownership documents. The expression on his face slowly changed. Finally, he picked up the last sealed envelope. "This appears to be addressed to the court," he said. Grant nodded. Yes, Your Honor, Mr. Brooks requested that it only be opened if ownership of his company was ever challenged. Margaret's confident smile disappeared. The judge opened the envelope and began reading aloud. If this letter is being read, it means someone I loved has confused blood with loyalty. Brooks Industrial Solutions was never built by one person. Claire stood beside me every late night, every unpaid invoice, every impossible deadline. If anyone deserves to protect what we created, it's the woman who sacrificed her dreams so ours could survive. The room was completely still. The judge continued, "My mother will receive the personal gifts listed in my estate, but the company, our home, and every decision regarding our legacy were legally placed into the Brooks Family Trust years ago. They are not probate assets and cannot be claimed through inheritance." Margaret's face turned pale. Her attorney hurriedly flipped through his papers, but there was nothing left to argue. The judge closed the letter. The court finds that Brooks Industrial Solutions and the residents are protected under the existing trust, Mrs. Brooks. Petition is denied in its entirety. A wave of relief washed over me. Outside the courthouse, our employees were waiting. When Grant announced the decision, applause broke out across the courthouse steps. Some of the technicians Daniel had worked beside for years shook my hand. Others hugged me with tears in their eyes. "They believed in you," one of them said. I smiled through my own tears. "No," I answered. "They believed in us." 3 months later, we expanded the apprenticeship program. Daniel had always dreamed of creating for military veterans and young technicians starting their careers. As for Margaret, she never contacted me again. The only thing she received was exactly what Daniel had intended: few personal keepsakes, and the chance to reflect on the difference between entitlement and love. On Daniel's birthday, I visited his favorite fishing lake with a cup of black coffee, just the way he liked it. The morning sun danced across the water as I whispered, "You protected all of us, even after you were gone." For the first time since losing him, I wasn't carrying anger. I was carrying gratitude, because Daniel's greatest legacy was never the company, the house, or the money. It was the life we built together and the truth that no amount of greed could ever steal it.